Patrick Strauss, it is an honor and privilege to have you here on season two of AI Trust Talks. I know we've had some close discussions around the Oxford Seard Business School, and I'm really excited to have you here and hear your thoughts about the future of AI and innovation.
Thank you very much, Emma. And it's a great pleasure to be invited to your podcast. And hopefully I can kind of contribute with some really interesting thoughts and, some of the insights that I've kind of learned and observed over the last 30 years being in this business. And, as you know, kind of, I'm supporting the Oxford AI and Innovation course. Glad you're enjoying it as well, which is obviously important to me. But by the same token, I've got a very rich, colorful kind of background, which hopefully I can bring to bear in our podcast today.
Thank you very much. And do you mind giving us a flavor about your experience and expertise you're bringing to the table today?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I've been in technology innovation for over 30 years. I live and breathe that space, but I'm going to be the very first person to always kind of be open and transparent. I don't write code. I can't read code, Emma. But what I'm very good at is I can break code and I do it very well. What does that mean in reality? Something fairly simple and straightforward. I work with many clients to help them understand how technology innovation works for them, but most importantly, what benefit, what value it drives for their business in return. So for me, it's important not just to kind of, and I might use this terminology a little bit throughout the podcast, depending on the questions we're going to go through, but I always use this sort of shiny toy syndrome. A lot of kind of challenges that I've come across in conversation is that people get incredibly excited when it comes to new technology and innovation, and they want a version of that, but not really understanding of why it's important to them, what value it can drive. And I'm sort of kind of that honest broker in the middle to kind of say, look, happy to give you this shiny toy, whatever technology it is, but it needs to drive value and purpose. And that's probably kind of again another word that you hear me kind of often using in conversation is, there's no point in kind of just using technology for the sake of technology just because everybody else raves about it. It needs to deliver purpose and value and outcome, business outcome for you, your team, your organization. And these are very fundamental conversations and questions that, believe it or not, are still not happening even in 2025. And that's kind of where I come in and, kind of hopefully enrich the conversation, but also drive better outcomes.
But you've made a really good point. I think any of us in the AI and innovation space now is all around managing the hype. How do we actually get leaders, get organizations to realize that there are some shiny, nice toys out there that you can use, but let's actually look at the business problem and see how we can relate that back to what the best outcome should be, AI or otherwise.
Yes, absolutely.
So, Patrick, you've described intelligent environments as the next frontier of digital transformation. What actually defines an intelligent environment, and how is it different from just a connected one?
That's a great question. So just to step one step back before I answer your question. So I've kind of created the term intelligent environments actually a couple of years ago when I worked in an organization that was looking sort of kind of into smart spaces. It kind of always sends the shivers down my spine when I hear smart spaces because it kind of sounds very kind of boxed in. Yeah. And when you ask people what is a smart space, they kind of think, oh, it's an office. It's kind of kind of an environment that, just put some sensors around it. And if you think about it, that feels very constrained really of what it is. So hence I renamed it to intelligent environments. And all of a sudden when you ask people, people kind of start thinking much wider in the sense of this space that we're trying to make more intelligent or smarter now, all of a sudden can be even outside, outdoors, for instance. So people kind of really like the kind of sort of intelligent environment terminology. And what it is, intelligent environment doesn't just collect data, but it uses the data to learn, to decide, and to act. That's the fundamental difference. So to give you an example, a connected factory gives you mainly kind of dashboards. But an intelligent factory, an intelligent environment closes the loop. So what that means is it senses, it reasons, but also it nudges the humans and the machines towards much greater outcomes in real time. So for me, actually, intelligent environments, the real step change here is when the system starts spotting patterns, if they start recommending actions, and this is the key, when they explain why. Intelligent environment is not just yet another graph. Yeah, and yet another dashboard. It's about really explaining the why and the impact and the purpose. Here's the first one and the purpose that it can deliver.
I think that's a great explanation and certainly something that people really do need to consider. I think it's fantastic that you've coined the intelligent environments position there. So, what's the most exciting or misunderstood aspect of Industry 4.0 right now?
I think for me, the most exciting part is not that the real value is just in the gadgets or the shiny toys that we kind of already mentioned early on. But for me, the exciting bit is when you start rewiring the whole system, the ecosystem, supply chains, factories, cities, to kind of make it basically one thing. But I think for me, the biggest misunderstood thing, and we're kind of seeing it a little bit with Industry 4.0, is it's not a shopping list for technology. Give me IoT, give me RFID, give me AI, give me whatever. It's all about really changing the way how the business models, but also the operating models work and shift much more towards the data, the AI, and the automation part in tow. So, what I'm saying is use technology as an enabler, not as a shopping list or, as your go-to shiny toy because, you hear it from others, who rave about it. And trust me, I've been in very senior executive conversations in boardrooms, yeah, and people get very, very easily excited by kind of looking at some of the hype, and we used hype earlier in the introduction, that people kind of just really do not understand the value that can be driven. And it's for me, my job is to kind of really kind of take a step back and kind of, build some kind of clearer understanding, but also build that excitement really in terms of, why Industry 4.0 is such a great thing to do. But also by the same token, it is not an easy thing to do as well. So I'm very, very conscious about that. Just because we have great technologies, it doesn't mean you can just do plug and play.
Agreed. That integration part is absolutely key. So, you've written about the convergence of digital twins and generative AI. What happens when these two technologies meet? And what does it unlock for industries?
That's a great question. I love that. So for me, digital twins gives you a living, breathing model of your assets, your processes. Generative AI gives you a conversational, creative brain on top. So if you put these two together, you move from a what happened or what will happen to design me three better ways to run this canning line, for instance, or production line, simulate the impact and explain the trade-offs in plain language. So what it allows you all of a sudden to do by bringing sort of kind of these two technology areas together is to unlock a much faster scenario planning, a better decision making, certainly at the edge as well, where you need it, but also the ability for non-experts to interact with very, very complex systems and solutions on the back of it. And I think that for me, that is a very, very exciting merge or kind of matchup to kind of say digital twins have been around for a long time, and I've seen very good and very bad ones. Same with generative AI. It's relatively new, but still, I think I can say, we all kind of tried it and used it, and we sort of can see the benefit it kind of potentially can bring for some of these kind of very small applications of why we're using it. But if you use it in a industrial context, I think the potential is so enormous that, it kind of really goes beyond some of the what some people believe really what good can look like for them.
Agreed. And could you share some real world example where intelligent environments have transformed operations or even decision making?
Luckily, at the moment, I'm actually right in the midst of one. Unfortunately, I can't tell you the client name, but what I probably can say is it's a global beverage brand that I'm sure everybody kind of have used as drunk before. So that's probably kind of as mystified as I can describe it. But here, where I'm kind of currently working with them to kind of build a digital twin around one of the canning lines. And specifically, you look at three key areas or use cases, which are yield, utilities, and line performance and efficiencies. And what has happened really, and what has led us to kind of get to this point with this client is kind of they kind of looked anecdotally always kind of where the losses are, but couldn't really sort of kind of really see from an operational perspective kind of exactly where they are and why. And this is kind of where we now kind of bring sensors that have been kind of already deployed across the line, bring them together, bring some of that harmonization and contextualization in to actually show precisely where the product or where energy or time is wasted and what impact that has both financially for the client, but also, for instance, in the use of or two, or for instance, in some of the products, the syrup, for instance, that is used to create these drinks. So for me, what is really changing is the conversation from we think to the data actually shows and verifies that. And that really helps operators, engineers, but also the leaders in the organization to make much more different decisions and actually joint decisions now with much greater confidence.
Yeah, that's a really good example, and that decision making, data-driven decision making is certainly a valuable asset to any organization.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And as we embed intelligence into physical infrastructure, how do we ensure these systems remain trustworthy, secure, and aligned with human values? We know the value of introducing AI and generative AI into our infrastructure and into our business operations, but how do we really keep that trust in the overall systems?
I would say really fundamental question that I think everybody who's kind of plays in the space need to kind of think about. I think for me, it has three sort of kind of components or basics that does need to kind of be there. It's clarity, it's constraint, and it's transparency. So by that I mean is be clear about what the system is allowed to decide, who's accountable, and how decisions can be checked and overridden. So I think for me, really, the governance part, and especially kind of not bringing the AI aspect in, the human element is sometimes really greatly overlooked when it comes to the design of future systems that incorporate AI. And I think this is kind of where we will see really a lot of debate. And you've gone through the kind of the AI course, business school as well. So firsthand and kind of the sort of the balance that need to be struck, but also kind of, the real value a human can bring in this sort of decision making and why it is important to kind of have that human loop in there.
I agree. And for me, it's really around showcasing governance as an enabler to innovation, not as a prohibitor. I don't want to see a checkbox exercise or governance to be viewed as a tick box exercise. To how do we kind of bring it to the forefront and get leaders to understand this really can be an enabler? And you touched on some really good points around accountability and transparency, etc. I also would add, I'm going to use the word purpose here. Purpose of the AI use case, and I think this kind of aligns to the hype versus the business justification or the business case, as well as does it align to the purpose of the organization and the strategy of the organization as well? Are you seeing alignment between those two, and how do you draw out the ROI of that use case?
Yes, and I would say again from personal experience, having worked with many organizations across a range of different industries and geographies, it's always too easy to bring the technology conversation in straight way. And what I kind of do is kind of, always ask the question of why. And I give you a good example. I've worked with retail company, very, very well-known brand in the UK. The CEO invited me and as he said, Patrick, I want RFID. Yeah. And that's so far there's nothing wrong with that conversation. But I would say where I'm very different when I engage with senior executives is, ask the question why. And he said, "Look, I'm traveling the world, and kind of see a lot of my competitors raving about this thing. We don't do anything in our organization. I think we're left behind." And the second question I asked him straight off is why. He looked at me and said, "You've just asked me that." I said, "Yeah, but you're not giving me a compelling reason. I don't understand bringing this technology in. What impact does that do, for instance, for your business, but most importantly, for your customers, yeah, who come into your stores and buy your necklaces and watches and rings and so on." And to kind of long story short, it took me 5 rounds of asking why in that same meeting until we actually ended up with kind of we may have a potential overstock problem across our stores where a piece of technology might be helpful to us to kind of understand more. So all of a sudden, we kind of would start off as a straightforward, we want RFID to kind of, we now actually have a business problem, still needs to be a little bit better refined. But all of a sudden, we have a business challenge. And now you can actually start really unpacking it to kind of say, so if we can solve this, what kind of does this to your customer experience ultimately? And it's all of a sudden a very, very different conversation that you have. But these are not the natural ways of how organizations sometimes really think about how to align their organizations, but let alone how to bring the right knowledge and expertise from, I would say, the surrounding ecosystems into their organizations to make it work.
This is actually a step that I take when I'm speaking to senior leaders and just the organization as a whole, when I'm talking to people about why we need responsible AI and why we need governance around that. And I always start with the why. And I, give examples of where AI has gone wrong that really kind of brings people to realize that there can be a problem with AI and there are some real life adverse media out there. And then the what, kind of what are the principles or what are the regulations we need to apply? And then the governance is around the how, right? This is how you really apply the principles in practice as well. So, really, those sort of key questions really do help in various different situations that we do come across.
It is. And for me, again, based on my very humble experience, it's those basics. If you get those basics wrong right from the off, this is why, whatever the statistics are, 70, 80% of digital transformation projects fail. And they fail not because of technology. We know that the technology works or we can make it work for our environment. That is not the problem. The problem for me, I would say, is culture, also is innovation leadership as well, and how to kind of execute those. I think if we can tackle those, through some very simple, and I call them simple basic steps to kind of get us from A to B to C. And the why question is such a powerful fundamental question that unfortunately we're not asking ourselves often enough.
Agreed. And just talking about innovation and certainly failures in innovation, I know there's some really high statistics on that. You've said that many digital transformation efforts fail not because of tech and because of culture. And we've touched on this just now, but what's the mindset shift that leaders actually need to make it successful?
This is probably one of my favorite questions so far. I actually work with Cranfield University as well as a master thesis supervisor. And last year, I had a student that was focusing exactly on next generation leadership, around this sort of kind of area. And what's kind of really came out of this is leaders really must move from just not just sponsoring the project, but actually owning the behavior change. For me, Emma, nowadays, this is all about having the right mindset. If I'm brutally honest, we have great leaders, but do they have the right mindset to kind of really get their head around of how certain innovations can really deliver a step change, a difference? And I would probably say I don't know many. I've come across a few, and it's been an absolute delight to work with those. But I would say, really, it needs to be kind of something where the leaders need to be willing to change incentives. They need to be prepared to simplify the processes. They need to empower the people to kind of actually drive change. Now, I say it as a kind of, Patrick, that's a given. Trust me, I have worked with many organizations where change management was something people couldn't even spell what change management is, let alone why they needed it. But this is kind of the whole point, Digital transformation is not something that is just a short-term project, 3 to 6 months, maybe 12 months or 18 months, it has a fixed start and an end date, and then, fantastic, you've proven something, let's move on. Absolutely not. Digital transformation is like continuous improvement, like Kaizen. It never ends. It never stops. You need to continuously understand, think, and readjust. And I would say leaders sometimes struggle with that change, that constant change that needs to be kind of embedded. And I understand that in some respect. But here's the statistics, and I use it in some of the presentations that I do. Sort of around the 1920s, the majority of organizations had about 67 years of a lifespan in their organization until change happened. That was sort of kind of, as I said, in the early 1920s. 100 years later, that lifespan of any organization has now reduced down to 15 years or less. We both know how quickly technology moves us. I mean, look how quickly AI has moved, from just kind of before pre-COVID, when AI sort of as a terminology, became sort of hot. And then see what happened during COVID and just after COVID, and, kind of all using it. It's a bit like the internet on steroids. When the internet was kind of created, it was a very slow adoption. Not many people could afford computers. And all of a sudden, look, internet is now part and parcel of our daily life. Yeah, I can't think of doing anything without the internet nowadays. But AI is going exactly the same. But the point I'm trying to make here is that technology moves at such incredible speed. And what we as leaders need to do, the organizations that we run, that we care for, we need to kind of understand, where's my organization in the next 5 to 10 years? And I had many conversations with people who say, Patrick, I can't think that far ahead. It's too long. Yeah. I mean, I even sometimes struggle to think the next quarter. I mean, that's a big red flag, but let's say most organizations live on a sort of 12-month cycle. Yeah. And then kind of see sort of what needs to change, etc. That's the sort of kind of the given. Here's the problem. There's a lot of disrupting forces, technology being one. There's another one, which is kind of geopolitical forces. There's sustainability and many other, all these forces, we just have no influence in kind of slowing them down or speeding them up. They are very natural and they've come really forceful on all of us. So think about kind of the organizations that we've all grown up with, but kind of disappeared, kind of sometimes overnight. Blockbuster is kind of one of those obvious ones. Yeah.
Mm.
And what Blockbuster has completely missed out is kind of a true understanding of how organizations that all of a sudden offer streaming services very quickly and easily eat their pie and, kind of basically made DVD and VHS cassette rentals pretty much obsolete. Kodak is another one. Yeah. Kodak completely missed the rise of digital cameras and mobile phones.
Yep.
Yeah. So Kodak as a brand obviously still exists today, but I would say there's a period where, this organization, was kind of going through lots of motions. And obviously the organization is very different today than it was probably the way how we grew up. And there's many more of these kind of similar examples. So this is kind of the reality, ladies and gents. Those kind of 10, 15 years of you owning and running a company, you need to start thinking now where your company is going to be in, let's say, 7 to 10 years. And that kind of needs that kind of different leadership, that different mentality to kind of really understand how the decisions are being made and who has the power, and not just kind of doing technology transformation for the sake of transformation's sake, because otherwise it's just very expensive theater of no purpose.
I think these are really good insights. And I like what you said about traditional sponsorship roles were really about sort of removing blockers. You couldn't get one thing an approval in place or something like that, to actually changing the mindset and the culture across the organization to adapt to this change that needs to happen. So tell me a bit more. How do you help organizations move from proof of concept paralysis, which we often see proof of concepts in place and they're great, but they'd never go live? How do you move that into scaled sustainable innovation?
Again, fantastic question. And I've seen it and unfortunately heard it too many times as well. I think for me, there's a very simple starting point to avoid this paralysis from the off. And that is kind of something that we've just said a couple minutes ago. What's the business problem we're trying to solve and why? That's the first question I always ask when I come to a new client, when I come to a new team, and they're super excited and, they kind of want to rule the world. And quite frankly, I bring them a little bit kind of back to reality by kind of just asking, so what's the problem and why is it important? And all of a sudden you kind of in a room of stunned silence, which is awkward for me in some respect, because I wasn't sure if I kind of said something, that upset the apple cart. But all of a sudden, what you start realizing, because of all this euphoria and hype, people haven't even done kind of the basics to kind of say, oh my God, yeah, why are we actually doing this? So here's the point. Do not even start doing and consider any POC. Don't even kind of get excited about which technology you want to use or technologies. Start simple. Understand what's the business problem you're trying to solve, and then answer the question why. And if I have ever the opportunity to come and work with you and for you, this is kind of where I guide you to say, if we can answer this succinctly, then we have such an immense opportunity to kind of get this right. The next challenge then is obviously to find the right technologies and to create the technologies in a way so that they deliver value. So for me, the next point really is, how will we prove value in the next 90 days? Don't think 6 months, don't think 12 months, 7 years. I give myself a very short window of how can we prove value in the next 90 days. And the next one is then, okay, so we know where we want to start. So we know the why. We know sort of the next few stepping stones in the journey. The next thing is, I need to know where the sort of the end game is. What's the vision? And the vision for me is sort of kind of equal to scale, and kind of how do I get from where I am to kind of the scale. And if I can bake this into my thinking of how I maybe do a pilot, a proof of concept, an MVP, better phrase of it, bake the scalability thinking into it as much as you can at this early stage. So for me, really, a pilot or an MVP is sort of kind of a mini version of the scale, and you're proving it, you're trying to prove it quickly, but most importantly, at any point in the process, and somebody kind of say, why are you doing this? We've already answered the why question, and we have a very succinct answer narrative to say, this is why it drives purpose for our organizations or the difference it makes to our customer experience. If we can get this done right up front, the rest, and I make this sound very simple and straightforward, of course, but the rest usually is kind of fairly sort of kind of simple in terms of let's just prove what we're trying to do.
And we hear a lot of language around kind of fail fast. So if we fail fast, we, can kind of re-pick it up and do it again. Would you consider your 90-day period like a fail fast process as well?
Yeah. So unfortunately, kind of this is kind of the world around digital transformation. But again, I would say from a mentality perspective, and I would say most people who work in this space do not come with that kind of software engineering background. If you do come from a software engineering background, you know exactly what fail fast, learn fast mentality means. But I think this is part and parcel really in order to kind of prove things quickly. So, you could do the traditional waterfall, you do your requirements gathering. It takes, many weeks and months to do that and to validate. And then you schedule the testing and, you can do that. But again, this is all traditional, old school. What people now really need to do, again, coming back to mindset, is to have that agile, iterative mindset embedded in them. And I'm living proof. I don't come from an original software engineering background, so I had to learn it myself and see it for myself. But I've worked with fantastic teams that really kind of understand, embed agile and scrum methodologies and actually kind of really work in kind of 1 or 2 week rhythms to kind of say, right, let's figure this idea out, let's do something. And then at the end of the 2 weeks, you kind of say, it wasn't quite really what we want. Let's learn the lessons. Let's kind of, kind of prepare for the next sprint and, do better. And to be quite honest, this is kind of what I'm currently seeing with my clients that I mentioned earlier. We're kind of having this kind of mentality to kind of really show them quickly, some of those sort of kind of what I currently call the Christmas lights, simply because it's a little bit seasoned. All we need to do is kind of just not create the whole Christmas lights that we're going to put and light up the tree, but let's kind of create the individual Christmas lights themselves, prove that we can turn them off and on. And that in itself, if we can do that consistently and methodically, and we build the chain of Christmas lights, and then we kind of ultimately end up to kind of the big live demo where we kind of invite probably all the seniors to kind of get excited and say, let me show you the Christmas lights that we've now created. And here, and then as we kind of all know, kind of Christmas light switch-ons is, the big wow and so on. But ultimately, it's that kind of agile mindset, that iterative thinking that is absolute part and parcel, in order to be successful and for you to be a successful leader today.
I love Christmas, so any analogy that relates back to festive season is good with me.
Thank God we didn't do this podcast at Easter then.
Chocolate, that one's okay too. So we've talked a bit about the future of work and the need and the importance of having humans as part of the whole machine collaboration as well. So what does human machine collaboration look like in an intelligent environment? And are we augmenting human judgment or are we replacing it?
Great question. And I'm probably kind of very, very straightforward in the answer. So in the environments that I work with, the most resilient model is augmentation, not replacement. And I'll tell you why. Humans are very good at context, understanding trade-offs, developing and understanding ethics. On the other side, machines are very good at looking at patterns and recognize those and, kind of relentlessly optimizing those. So for me, the sweet spot is actually designing workflows where the systems, the machines do all the heavy lifting, but the human still owns the sort of the judgment call, so to speak. I've been in many conversations in the past where organizations are very, very quick to judge, to say, oh, we kind of bring robotic process automation into the back office. So how many people can we kind of get rid of? It's a pure number exercise. It's kind of bring technology A in, how much can we save equals how many dollars. You can look at this. But again, I would say this is probably kind of the dinosaur type view in terms of, and this is kind of the old traditional world. Nowadays, things look very different. Why is that? Simple reason. The way how most organizations work, you have a front office and you have a back office. And obviously, we all know the back office usually is kind of the lesser value type part of the organization. Really, the front office is more because you engage with customers and clients, and you do sales and solutioning, and probably kind of where the crux of it. In the back, you kind of generate invoices, and you kind of do a bit of IT and all of that. And yes, I can see a certain argument to say, why don't we automate the less or the non-value add processes, but then kind of, just get rid of people. And I always say, you have employed people in the back office for many years. They know sometimes the organization way better than yourself. Let's be truly honest here. These people actually have tremendous value for and to your organization already. You just don't recognize it. You just see them as a number. You just see them as kind of a puzzle part that kind of does a certain job. But actually, from a knowledge perspective, it is something that you kind of get very difficult to replace. And certainly you can't replace it with kind of just a mundane robotic process automation system. So I've had, in certain parts, very good conversations with many clients where I've brought this exact same conversation to the table. And I said, look, why don't we look at how we can move those people from back office into the front office? And I had to explain to say, with some more upskilling and training, with kind of, and some people probably were absolutely delighted to kind of do different jobs all of a sudden, to do something that probably is a bit more creative, like such as solutioning or sales, for instance, and nurturing that kind of desire to transform. So here's the thing that I always ask. So if you want to transform your organization, why does it always have to end up with just technology is the answer? It's not. And I've already kind of just said, humans are very, very good doing things that machines can't do. So if you think you just kind of do full automation of a factory that, kind of just relies on technology and data and algorithms and IoT and all of these fantastic things that I live and breathe every day, you will at some point find that there you have miscalculated, because you will still need humans somewhere in your autonomous construct, because it just won't work. Quite naturally, kind of that raises a lot of conversation and debate in organizations that I kind of come and have these conversations with. But importantly, kind of people start saying, I get it. And all of a sudden, what you see is actually a very different dialogue to kind of say, actually, we realize there is human capital, knowledge, experience that you sometimes you can't put into pound sterling, dollars, numbers, but actually makes a lot of sense if you can bring these people into kind of a front office type environment to actually drive greater customer experiences, drive greater sales, etc., etc. So that trade-off is something that a lot of organizations still find very difficult to do. But I think the sweet spot is kind of, there is a space for technology, but there's a very, very strong place for humans. And this is why I'm a firm believer. AI is not necessarily going to get rid of jobs. It will in certain parts, but it's not replacing people. People are still required to kind of deal and configure AI in a way so that AI actually works in the right way. And you, Emma, you know this very well from the course itself. So I hope I'd kind of teach to the convergent anyway.
Patrick, those are really good insights. I think we've seen some examples of organizations sort of cutting staff and then realizing they need to bring them all back and making some fundamental, issues and impact the organization, specifically negative impact the organization by removing those employees out of it. And I think the point you raised around that human capital knowledge is imperative. And it's something I always talk when I'm speaking to senior leaders when we start talking about operational resilience and the risk that you raise or that you could develop because you have got rid of that human capital knowledge, because you've introduced a new system. Okay, if that system fails, what's your fallback plan? And I think sometimes those fallback plans are not always considered. I also think that in the age of AI and developing emerging technologies, it elevates the residual risk of operational resilience as well. And it's really something that organizations need to start considering.
Yeah, I totally agree.
And how do we design these systems to enhance human agency rather than just erode it?
Probably kind of use the two principles. So keep the humans in the decision loop and keep the system more in the evidence loop. Yeah. So the system really needs to kind of provide the sort of kind of the answer to the why question a little bit more. Yeah. Why do I need to change X, Y, and Z? But the decision has to stay really more firmly with the human rather than the system. And I think if we sort of kind of design the interfaces that explains options and confidence levels, if we kind of design systems kind of with an opt out, or if you just kind of click accept, I think we're kind of just missing a complete trick. It just doesn't feel like that actually we're kind of designing it in a way that we still own parts of it, and that we're kind of, driving that kind of decision loop, in a way so that it actually adds value. And I think this is important when you design AI systems nowadays. One of the things that I kind of, have been big stickler for many years, not necessarily AI related, this example, but, kind of look at mobile apps. It's sometimes fascinating when a new company comes and, spends a fortune on marketing and then, encourages you to kind of download the app. And, it's not the downloading of the app or the registration to the company, but when you actually start then looking at the app and try to use it, it's clunky. It actually kind of doesn't do what you would expect it to do. And again, this is kind of the whole point I'm trying to drive is kind of, have you actually considered designing systems with humans in mind? Or have you was just kind of trying to get to market very quickly without kind, and circumventing, certain processes quickly just so that you have something? And I think this is where, again, a lot of companies have failed to kind of really understand and to be kind of really close to the end customers of what they're expecting. So for me, just creating sort of kind of a opt-out option or kind of, just accept, but nothing else. I think this is the wrong way of designing. And, again, this is probably kind of more in an area where you go into user interface, user experience type thing. I have seen absolutely horrifying mobile apps designs where I would really question, kind of, and sometimes from established companies as well. Whereas whoever's kind of been tasked to do that, I mean, I have no idea what brief they've got, but they certainly haven't done that organization, that brand, any justice, given the kind of the poor experience that they have delivered to me. One reason or another, I am being called the Gordon Ramsay of customer experience. That's not by my choice, by the way. This were certain clients I've worked with in retail and hospitality. And that could be a good thing, but it could be also a curse. I am very passionate that we drive purpose and value in what we do. It's as simple as that. There's many ways of how we get to that answer. And the answer is certainly not just through technology. Now, we need to understand that human element, that kind of, bringing that decision understanding into it and use the systems to provide the relevant evidence loop around that. And that's the only kind of two principles I can really see working well hand in hand.
I think that's fantastic insights. And I don't want to open a can of worms because this topic is for a whole nother podcast. But if
Yeah.
we haven't been successful at customer experience for humans, when the customer becomes a machine, how do we actually manage that experience now, right? When we move into agentic AI, and we're already seeing it, we've already seen our first use case go live in the UAE, government and Mastercard as well, and there's other instances as well. So it's an interesting place to be in, and I know some good customer experience experts that are really looking into the space as well.
Absolutely. And as you said, we don't want to go off piste here. It's certainly, happy to come back, obviously, talking about war. But one of the things that I've done yesterday with a live session was apparently, 33% of people in the US, which I think was the main market for that research, have now confirmed that they're using Gen AI to do the Christmas list and the Christmas shopping. So looking and
Wow.
asking Gen AI to say, what am I going to buy my wife? And here, this is going to make you laugh because I had one participant who came on and he was very open and he said, "Yeah, I've done it last week. I've actually tried to figure out what lipstick my wife would love because I'm not an expert. And by the way, I totally get as soon as he finished talking, I totally was on his side. And you said, my wife has got so many different lipsticks, and I basically, ChatGPT, I think he used other tools available to basically provide some guidance and preferences. And ChatGPT basically gave me a range of different answers that I explored, and now I know what to look out for. And I thought I haven't even thought about this one, but the Deloitte research clearly confirms, this is a global trend, only further kind of going further to kind of really change the world. But it begs the question: who owns the customer relationship now? Is it the brand? Is it AI?
It's a fascinating topic, but do you think this is now, there's traditional kind of memes and jokes around how husbands or fathers just do shopping on the 24th of December. Do you think Gen AI is now going to get them to do it earlier than that?
They'll probably say go to the nearest petrol station and buy a bunch of flowers. I don't know, but I just find that fascinating but
Yeah.
scary in another and just to finish this one off, it's really trendy. So I had three ladies on that call as well. So I've asked them, I said, so imagine your husband's partner, would admit at Christmas Day that they've kind of basically used ChatGPT to kind of find a Christmas. How would you react? And all three of them said that's fine, as long as it's the right one. I don't care. I don't care how we kind of figure that one out. But as long as it's right. So again, gives you a little bit of food for thought to kind of say, yeah, but ChatGPT being sort of kind of the shopping assistant for us, and kind of if you program it well and right, and again, this goes a little bit into the ethics space and so on. I can see a lot of potential, but also a lot of risks in that one as well from a retail customer experience perspective.
Yeah, I actually use ChatGPT for this. If I'm looking for a particular product that I can't find just on my regular kind of website search, I put it into ChatGPT and say, where can I buy this in the UAE and what's
Yeah.
the best price? Which one's offering the best price? So there's a huge value add to just for shopping online. Whole new experience out there. And I want to touch on a bit about your global experience and perspectives. Which regions or sectors are leading in intelligent environment adoption and why?
So I think for me, the obvious ones would be advanced manufacturing, logistics, utilities, and I think probably in parts because of the margin pressures that they have, but also I think sort of from a utilities perspective, probably more the regulatory pressures because they are forced more to care about the efficiency and reliability of things. So I probably see those probably fairly strong in terms of leading. From a geographical perspective, for me, probably the US for sure, Europe undoubtedly, kind of probably kind of sort of the Middle East. There's so much stuff happening in the Middle East that, it started to become sort of kind of a bit like a lighthouse setup in some respect, where people kind of go and look and say, look at what happens in Saudi, look at what happens in Dubai, etc. So I see more and more of that really happening, which is great. But also, I would say, we shouldn't discount sort of Asia Pac region as well. And there's a lot of noise, there's a lot of stuff happening. But I would say if you push me, probably sort of kind of the Middle East, there is probably kind of some really exciting times ahead.
And I want to touch more on the GCC region. So we know that a lot is happening in the UAE and Saudi Arabia as well. What role, from a global perspective, can the GCC region play in shaping the future of Industry 4.0?
Yeah, I think the GCC, I think, has a really rare combination of ambition, capital, but also I think sort of kind of the greenfield mindset. Yeah. I mean, look at Dubai. I mean, many years ago, it was kind of a desert, and kind of look at what it has become now. And, there are very similar type other regions in the wider area that, can benefit from the same. But I kind of see really entire new districts and ports and airports and industrial zones being designed as intelligent environments, just to kind of connect back to kind of where we started this conversation, right from day one, not being retrofitted, but really kind of by design, kind of designing it in a way so that, you kind of design it with sustainability aspects, you design it with kind of the right technology, you'll design it with future proofness and built in. If the GCC region can really focus more around the open standards, the skills, but also the exportable know-how, and not just iconic or vanity type projects, I think this region could really become a test bed for the next generation of industrial and urban operating models. But look around you, because you're in that region. I'm not. But everything that I know about, the region is phenomenal to kind of see in terms of the pace, in terms of the investment that is there, but also in terms of the buzz that kind of gets created around it. But also, this is not just talk, this is not just slideware. I mean, look at kind of how Dubai kind of went really hard and strong in terms of automating some of the sort of public sector services and become making it much more sort of kind of easy to kind of access things online rather than going into a government office and kind of do paperwork and all of that. I mean, if I compared with the UK, I think the UK, has used a lot of talk around, modernizing and digitizing and all of that. Look at what happens in Dubai. Dubai is kind of at least 3, 4, 5 steps ahead of that. And, they're making it real and yeah, going big. And, if Dubai can do it, there's other places that can equally kind of do it as well. But the difference is it's having leaders that have the right mindset, but also having the ambition to do different and better. And I think that's a fundamental difference.
Those are really good points, and I was actually just gonna say add leadership and vision into the picture as well, because we've got brilliant leaders, we've had a vision for a number of years, and it's really around driving and everyone being aligned to that vision, whether it be government or public or private sector, and we all just collectively, those based here really do drive that vision as well. And you asked me actually before we went live, one of the reasons why I have been living here for the last 18 years, and that's because of government efficiency and the services we have offered just at the click of our fingers, a couple of clicks through and the job's done. It's just so easy and efficient in government services here.
And I wish I can share that same enthusiasm where I am. And, for me, it still feels like we're in the Stone Ages. These are sort of kind of the environment that, I feel very passionate about. And, as soon as I have an opportunity, I would love to kind of come and join you if I ever
Yeah.
get the opportunity. But by the same token, what it shows, it works. Yeah. Things can
Great.
get done if you kind of understand how technology, how to employ it, but also what value and what purpose do you want to drive? And I think, Dubai in many aspects have done it the right way and is demonstrating it. And, you're in part a living proof to say, this is one of the reasons why it is kind of such a delight to, for instance, live and work in Dubai. I'm sure there's other places in the world where equally, you have a great lifestyle, but also we all love technology and technology should be enabler and should be a joy to use rather than be a frustration.
Agreed, agreed. So, Patrick, we have a signature closing question on season 2 of AI Trust Talks. So, what's the one belief about AI and trust that you hold, even if it's unpopular?
Can only choose one. Okay. I firmly believe you can't just add trust to AI afterwards. So there's a whole debate, kind of about AI and trust and ethics and all of that. I think you can only decide right from day one when you start designing AI. And that sometimes means you may have to go slower. And I think that's kind of something that a lot of companies probably really struggle with. Yeah. Coming back to the point of we move fast. Yeah. This is the world that, many people that live in that sort of technology world, this is kind of the mantra. You need to move fast. Yeah. Fail fast, move fast, etc. I firmly believe if you want to get this right, if you want to kind of create a differentiator, and let's face it, AI at the moment feels like lots of mushrooms popping up. What you really need to understand is where is your purple wing? And I use this expression because it's something that I sort of kind of learned over my many years as well. The purple wing is what makes you stand out. So my question would always be to you if you kind of reflect on this podcast and you think about sort of kind of the direction that you're going to take either for the idea or the business that you have. What is your purple wing and why? And again, if I would sit in front of you, I would ask this question right now. And what I would expect is, you have a super succinct answer. But if you haven't got that succinct answer, that's where the problem is. This is where you need to kind of really think about. And the idea is that you sometimes may have to go back to the drawing board. You may have to sometimes just embrace that you may have to go a little bit slower, even though the mantra is move fast. But being slow trust me, you might look in hindsight way better by going a little bit slower, but actually you get the ethics, you get the safety, and you get the governance around AI better done than anybody else. And that makes you different. That makes you innovative. This is the reason why people come to you and not to all the other AI providers. So have a think about really in terms of where that trust element and where kind of your mindset around AI is. Don't be kind of just a follower. Don't become just a me too as well, because AI is great and it kind of promise you millions of dollars and pounds to kind of earn on the back of it. Many companies have tried, many companies have failed. But if you want to succeed, listen to my advice, find that purple wing, understand it, but sometimes that means you may have to go a little bit slower than probably what you anticipate to do. But that's okay.
That is fantastic advice. Patrick Strauss, thank you so much for all of your sharing, all of your experience and expertise with the listeners of AI Trust Talks today. I know there's a lot of sound bites and insights that they would have got from you. So thank you very much for sharing them with us today.
Thank you very much, Emma. And can I just ask, can I come back? At
Of
some
course you
point, I
can.
would
We'll
love
have
to.
you back.
Would love to. Excellent. Real pleasure. Thank you very much, everybody.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of AI Trust Talks. If you found it valuable, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with anyone who might be interested. Join the conversation with us on Instagram at AI_trust_talks and follow along on Spotify, Amazon, YouTube. Your engagement helps us to keep these important discussions alive. From all of us here at AI Trust Talks, thank you for being part of this journey. Until next time, keep building trust where it matters the most.